What do you think is important for the people to know versus what is not important for the people to know?
I don't know. Like when I'm thinking of like anything that has like loss in it, so like a death or a car crash, a shooting, these
Right.
kind of things. I know part of it is important because you want to make sure. It's like I know sometimes you can spit it into like an awareness story.
Sure.
Like here's a don't drive while drunk and that kind of thing. But I'm also like I always wonder like is it really worth it blasting this person's name out to the world that they died in this really tragic way? And I'm like thinking of like for example, like if I had known somebody who had died in like such a tragic manner, and then to see their face plastered at the 4, 5, 6 shows, constantly like, yeah, we know that 32-year-old blah 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 died because of this. It's like, is it really helping? Do the public really need to know? Am I just re-traumatizing their family and friends every time we mention his name?
Hey Amanda, how's it
Hi,
going?
it's a going.
Fair enough. Before we get started, I mean, some of you might recognize Amanda from a previous episode that at this point we did eons ago. But for those of them who might not know you, feel free to let the people know who you are, what you do, any likes and dislikes in personal life. Yeah, anything and everything you want to share about yourself.
Sounds good. Well, hi. Not sure if you all recognize me from 3 years ago
3 years
now.
ago, yeah.
I was on Zoom, so I look a little different now. But yeah, hi, my name is Amanda Siew. I'm currently a grad student getting my master's at a university in Oklahoma. I major in journalism. That's kind of what my main profession is. What else do I say? I'm very used to like introducing myself in an academic like space. So I'm just like, hey, if you're interested in grad school, I do research on burnout amongst journalists. I know, very fun topic, very passionate about it. And I'm from Malaysia. I've been in Oklahoma since, what has it been? 6 years now, I think. So
Isn't
crazy
it
time.
wild to think that it's been 6 years since you've been here?
Yeah, I feel like I've kind of been noticing that lately. Because I think when I first started here, we're gonna just dive into it at this point.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
But like I feel like when I first started here, I always introduce myself as Malaysian. But I've noticed lately that I don't say that anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah, like
Oh.
part of my duties as a grad student is I TA for students, and so I'm around these undergrads a lot. And whenever they're like, "Wait, I didn't know you were international. Wait, I didn't know you were Malaysian." I was like, "Yeah, isn't it not obvious?" Like, "No, you don't sound it." And I was like, "I haven't told anybody that I'm from Malaysia," and I feel like I'm like losing that part of my identity, low key.
Oh wow.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make this whole thing like deep.
No.
off the
It's
bat,
okay.
but-
Hey, I'm a sucker for deep conversations, so it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. Is that kind of scary?
A little bit, I think. Like, I think it's just like I know that my identity is still Malaysian
Right.
firsthand. It's just weird that like it's not such something that I present very often anymore. Not that like if you look at me, you're like, oh, I'm Malaysian, right?
Right.
More off the bat, you'll see me. It's like, oh, you're Asian or you're Chinese, something like that.
Right.
But like it's weird that I don't talk about that part of my life as much anymore. It feels a little weird being so far away from home and for so long. And now I sound and think a lot more like people here.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's kind of weird. I don't know.
No, I've kind of noticed that too. Well, I mean, when people talk about it, I do mention that I'm an international student and I'm not from here and that kind of stuff. But more so about like thinking like people do over here. Definitely noticed that in some aspects of the way I like approach things as well. So yeah, I think like once that distance of being away from home, like in terms of time, just increases. Yeah, like I think it's just second nature at this point.
Yeah.
Because you could say you've lived almost a little less than a third of your life away from home, right?
So yeah, it's kind of scary to think about. I think it's like I feel like this wasn't something that I expected off the bat.
Sure.
It's like I think when I first moved here, it was like, okay, now I get to like build this better life, but this part of my other part of my life, being Malaysian and international student, is still always going to be a big part of it.
Right.
I just feel like it hasn't been as like prominent anymore, which is just weird. And it also like, for me at least, like journalism wasn't an interest that I had back home. It was something I found here.
Right.
And so I've been learning and practicing journalism in a very American space. And so like that part of like my professional education sides are all very American centric too. And so like I just feel like it's weird. Like it's weird. I just don't know how to explain it, but it's just weird.
But weird is not necessarily bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
You know, like, I guess there's a lot of things that could be weird, but that doesn't necessarily mean bad. Most times it just means that it's different from what you expect it to possibly be. But yeah, speaking of the media space, and I should probably try what I shouldn't hit that as much, but talking about the media space, from what you observed externally of the Malaysian media space versus America, what would you say are like some of the differences, or what are some of the similarities as well?
Okay. I'll preface this by saying my opinion is very, again, American centric.
Sure.
Because, like, again, when I was back in Malaysia, I consumed news like very sparsely. You know, I grew up watching a lot of news with my parents at night, like 12 a.m. news, but like I never would go out and actively read it.
Yeah.
I wasn't a very informed person back then. But based on what I've known,
yeah,
I think definitely you have a more freedom and space to have opinions here,
right.
Which is helpful with the journalism side of things because you get to ask, you know, tougher questions, especially when it comes to like in the political side of things, is what I'm kind of thinking of it. Like it's a lot safer to practice here than it is Malaysia. I know now, you know, there's a bigger push toward, you know, free press and accountability at home, you know, but like we had a prime minister that was throwing people in jail and banning them from the country because they were trying to ask him about a scheme that was in, right? And so
you're talking about the one MDB.
Yeah.
No. I think we talked about that last time too.
You know, some things don't change.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
No, you're fine. But yeah, and so I think those spaces are just very different. Plus, here it's a lot more like you have more local kind of stations throughout. That's kind of where I'm within. So like you have the national side of things, but you have the local news kind of serving specific communities, and that's kind of where I find my passion. But whereas in Malaysia, I feel like most of it's kind of national conglomerate type things. Again, very uninformed opinion because I haven't been back in like 6 years. But that's at least the biggest thing for me would be kind of like the way you practice journalism as far as like freedom and what you can push, things like that. Yeah.
I think that's something that like lately I've also kind of been thinking about from the sense of like doing this because I've wondered, okay, like if I'm not able to stay here, where could I go, and like how freely could I like do all of this kind of stuff? And yeah, like as things stand, for sure, like the major positive of being here in the US is that you're not going to get much backlash from the law. Sure, you're going to get, there's always consequences to the things that you say, and there's always going to be someone or the other that's probably not going to like what you say, and you're going to get some backlash. That's everywhere you go.
Yeah.
But I think the scary part for a lot of people in other countries is the reciprocation or what the law might do and how could they possibly get into trouble. Because there's stories of like, for example, stand-up comedians being in trouble in some countries and so on. So, you know, like in that case, like the fact that we're able to express our opinions, we're also in a very privileged position in that sense.
Yes.
Because we're here in the US of A. America. Yeah. I was going to say beep, yeah, but I could curse. I don't really give a shit. But
oh, really?
Yeah,
well, things has changed since the last time I was here because I remember on my episode you had cursed for the first time.
Yeah, but and now I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Curse.
Oh my goodness!
If you want to curse, curse. If you don't want to curse, don't curse.
Things has changed.
Yeah, things have changed. I guess it's a little more casual. Well, maybe not when I'm trying to talk to a professor, but
that's fair.
Yeah, but generally, like I try to keep it as casual as it can possibly be. So, but yeah, what I was gonna say was America. Fuck yeah! But anyway,
insert like eagle screeching sound.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, like in that sense, what is it about like you mentioned like not the national conglomerate style of news, but the more local aspect of it, to put it in that sense. Maybe I should keep the bottle down. Anyway. No, you're good because I keep on hitting it.
You're supposed to move it here.
No, it's okay because I'll need it at some point.
Yeah,
so anyway, before I get too distracted,
we're talking about local news, right?
Yes, talking about local news, like how does the state politics influence it at all?
I mean, politics is always going to be a huge part of news.
Right.
And it definitely does shape. What do you mean by shape it?
Let me put it this way. I guess there's like speaking of India specifically, like I don't know specific news channels and where they get funding from or whatever, but I guess we could take the more national example too, right? Like you have Fox News that's looked as more as the right-leaning one, and like CNN or MSNBC is the more left-leaning one, and so on. Like, does that happen on the state level?
I feel like sometimes it could. I feel like I'm gonna say that it doesn't.
Okay.
Because I think because it's smaller. Like yes, we still have like issues with ownership and affiliations. Like, you know, like some stations are gonna be affiliated with Fox.
Right.
Some stations are affiliated with ABC, and you know they're kind of perceived to be more left leaning. But I feel like at least with local news, I feel like because it's such a smaller scale, I feel like people have more power to be neutral. I think at least that's, again, uninformed opinion, but that's kind of what I feel like it is, because like yes, you still have like pressure from management, you have, you know, the bigger companies who own the station kind of doing that, but I feel like with local news, because it's so like focusing on what the community wants, I feel like it's kind of not the same. I'm not making any sense right now.
No, I think you are. I think you are. Yeah. In that there is a difference in the fact that they're able to be a little more, or I guess, like you said, they have the power to be a little more neutral compared to like their overlords, if you will, in the national space.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, I don't know if like you know the details about this, but how does that model work of like being affiliated to ABC or being affiliated to Fox? Is that like a channel being bought out by those national companies, or is it just like a contract thing?
So I'm not as familiar with like the more contract sales aspect of it. I can only speak from the more like production content type, because I used to work as a news producer. So my old station that I used to work at is affiliated with CBS, and what that means, we were partnered with them so that we could get content from them. So for example, like we cover all the local stuff, but sometimes there's going to be huge national stories like politics and disasters and whatnot.
Sure.
And so we would be able to pull content from their kind of correspondence on the national end to kind of supplement our shows. So I think that's, at least from my role, what being affiliated with them meant.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so in return, since we take their stuff, if we get like really big content, like stories on our end, it could also supplement it in their shows as well. So like, for example, trigger warning, death. You know, we recently had the death of the non-binary student here in Oklahoma, and that made really big national news. And so I think, from what I've seen, I think they also like use some of the content from like local stations who, you know, had affiliations to kind of help their own national coverage, because, you know, it's not realistic that you can send people everywhere all the time. And so I think that kind of partnership, at least from the content aspect that I'm aware of, you know, there's a lot of like give and take type of relationships there.
Understood. So it's kind of like, say if I work for like a local news channel in Oklahoma, and the company I work for is affiliated to CBS, like you said, CBS could have me as a correspondent for the recent case about the non-binary student who passed, and sort of vice versa. Like you can rely on them if you need to.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I mean, again, like I've not been focusing much on like, or I've not focused on the Indian media space as much.
Yeah.
But the one thing I remember seeing usually is that you would see correspondents going to these places. Like, depending on where the news is about a certain thing, they might be in like the north of the country, or they could be in the south, depending on what happens where. Like, for example, I think the one thing I can think about right now is there was like an air crash that had happened close to, like, at the airport that's close to us, like the airport that we frequent back home. This was 2010, May 2010. There was an air crash, and I remember like some correspondents of like national news channels had also gone there. And I mean, I was in Dubai at that point, but we were watching these news channels, and like that's the vague memory I have of it. So I guess that's sort of like the difference in terms of like the local news versus national news brackets, because I don't think the local news channels back home, at least from what I know, and people, if you know any better, please correct me. I don't know if there's a connection there between like the national and the local, but over here, based on what you said, there is a connection there. But that doesn't necessarily have to influence your political affiliation.
No, I, at least again from my like very young kind of fresh journalist, haven't been in the industry for all that many years, opinion, I don't think that it does.
Mm.
Like from what I remember, at least on the content side, it's like you would be able to go to this page for all the CBS affiliates with a login, obviously, and then, you know, sometimes if they're interested in a story that's running locally, they'll ask you to upload stuff there. And within that pool, they have also other stations across the United
Different
States.
states, right?
And so you can get all this content all over the country, not just from CBS, but also other CBS affiliates, so that we're not just, you know, local news if there's something really big importing. Big import.
Hey, you're good. You're good.
Importing something really big and important happening elsewhere, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Understood. So like if something is happening in Colorado,
Mhm.
your channel in Oklahoma can reach out to them and
Yeah.
talk about the story
Mhm.
based on the information that they have.
Yeah.
What was your experience like as a producer?
It was fun.
Mm.
It's weird because a lot of people ask why I want to do it. Like I had a student who, you know, they are trying on different roles, trying to figure out what they like, and they're like, I don't think I can be a producer. It's too stressful. And I'm like, that's the fun part for me. It's getting to be in that stress. I'm somebody who works better under stress, which is really bad because I procrastinate a lot. I've noticed now in grad school, I tend to wait until like 2 days before an assignment that's due to get it out, and it's good-ish. But I tend to wait until I feel really pressured to do work on something. And so like being in that fast-paced environment, kind of, you know, having to make decisions like off the bat, like split-second decisions, you know, there's like a thrill to it. And so I guess for those who don't know what a news producer does, so let's say you're watching like a TV news show, right? A producer behind it is deciding what content to put in, how you stack the content, so what goes first, what you see last, what visuals do you see with it? Do you see a graphic? Do you see a text? Do you see a reporter, like not a reporter on it? But you get to decide a lot of those different things. And then at the same time, you're sitting in the booth, which is what we call in the control room, and you're boothing the live show. And when that goes on, sometimes obviously just breaking news, things change, you know, and you're in that kind of like pilot position, like steering your plane, you know, figuring out where do you go, how do you avoid all these obstacles so that the people at home, they don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but they see a really clean, smooth show. So it's a lot of stress, but it's a lot of fun. I like to tell people it's like putting like a really complex jigsaw puzzle together, which is something I like to do anyway. So yeah, it's fun.
And what times did you work on? I know we might have talked about
No, it's
this,
okay. The question is, what time did I not work?
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I started working on the weekend morning show.
Okay.
And that meant I would have to go in on weekends at like midnight or 2 and work until the morning, and then I was off. And then the rest of the days during the week, I would work kind of a regular 9 to 6 type of schedule, filling in where I was needed. Eventually, I moved up to the weekend PM show, so the evening show. So I would work like 2 p.m. till about 10, 11 at night on weekends, and then normal shift on weekdays. So my kind of time schedules flip-flopped a lot. That was my main 2 shows. We were understaffed at the time that I was there too. And so they had me kind of filling in on different positions. So I can list it out. I have the weekend. I've done the weekend morning, the weekend evening, the 9 a.m., the noon, and the 5.
The last 3 being weekdays?
Yeah, weekdays.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I've been on all these different type of like sleeping schedules. It wasn't fun flip-flopping from one thing to another, but yeah, I've worked a lot of weird times. I was awake at like weird graveyard hours for a lot of my career, but it was fun. Fun.
Hey, but there were things you took out of that experience that you cherish. Is that the right word?
I think so. I will say I think a part of why I managed to kind of fit in with that overnight shift so well was because, you know, if y'all remember from when I was last on this episode, I was back in Malaysia. And part of that was I was home for my senior year.
Yeah.
COVID happened, and I was still going to classes and working on that flip-flop schedule. And so I was up at like midnight working until noon. So I think that kind of set me up for success when I started my weekend morning shift. But yeah, no, I definitely cherished that time. I missed a lot of people I worked with. I think that's the weird part about it too, because I had left after a year because of immigration issues, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't leave on like a bad note. You know, everybody was really upset that I was leaving. At least I think they were upset.
From what you know.
From what I know.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of times, we're going to get a little bit deeper. Well, not
Go for
deep,
it.
but like it's going to be different.
Go for it. It's okay.
But I remember stepping out of that workplace. It was 4th of July was my last day too, which is really funny. But I remember leaving feeling so upset because it felt like I had just started getting it. You know, like when you start a first job, it's like, how do I, especially out of college, you know, it's like, how do you, you know, build your credibility? How do you get all these people who have been in the industry for so long to trust you with all these bigger responsibilities? And so like I remember I was going through like a period of burnout early in my career. Well, only that 1 year I was there. And then kind of like slowly working my way up, finally getting promoted after 10 months. And, you know, I was starting to get on this like really consistent track of like, hey, I can move myself off weekends, which is like a big promotion. You know, I saw that coming, and then it was, oh, we're going to take that away from you because you don't have a visa right now.
Yeah.
And it sucked because, you know, my company was trying so hard to help me get that, but it just
Didn't happen.
it didn't work out. And so when I started grad school after that, it was just like a period of just weird. Like one of my professors who I've been speaking to about was like, I think you're still kind of grieving your job, which I never thought about because it was, well, you know, I'm just moving on from one thing to the next, but I couldn't understand why I was so upset about it. And then you see all the people that I started with and they're moving up in the business, they've changed markets or they're getting promotions. And I'm like, I'm stuck in grad school. And it's like, I could have seen myself in your shoes getting this bigger show and doing all these cool things, but now I'm stuck here. It's like I had like a really bad case of FOMO for like months when I first started grad school, which is crazy because it's like I know being in grad school is also like a really huge privilege.
Absolutely.
But like I was so upset about it. Like I couldn't. I'm a lot better about it now. You know, now it's like, okay, acceptance, we're gonna move on. Things happen for a reason. And I'm happy with the place that I'm in right now. But like when I first started, it was rough. And my professor was like, I think you're still grieving your job. And I was like, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't realize that was a thing. So yeah, took a bit of a turn there, but
No, you're good. Because I mean, to sort of briefly touch on it, we can go into detail if you want. But how it works for international students in the US, if you're unaware, is that if you're here as a long-term student who's here for like anywhere from a year to 4 years or longer, you're on an F1 visa, and that usually allows you to work for a year plus 2 years if you have a STEM degree. If not, just the 1 year. So in your case, since you were in the media and like mass comm field, you only got 1 year after your graduation period. So you worked that 1 year, but then sponsorship of visa didn't work, right?
Yeah. So yeah, what they tell you, you know, at least what I was told while I was at the university was, you know, hey, once you finish your OPT, you go apply for this H1 visa. And so it was like, oh, it sounds fairly easy enough. I didn't realize until going through the process itself that it was so different. Like, no, I feel like when I was here, like nobody had told me it was a lottery system. And so it was like it was really bad timing too, because I left in July and then the semester started in August. And by July, no universities were accepting anybody, right? Because typically the applications are either December or February for the fiscal year after. And so I was like, crap, like I'm in this really, really bad spot. Like I felt like I wasn't ready to leave. I didn't know, at least career-wise, what I could do back in Malaysia because again, all of my practices and all my education has been so American-centric. And I was like, can my skills even apply back home? What was I even gonna do? Because I feel, you know, like if you have communication degree, I feel like that's a lot more applicable outside. But because my skills were so set on producing, I had no idea where I could end up. And so it was like, do I go back home? Do I find a white man on the street to get married with? You know, it was insane. And it was like, I was stressed out. Like, and it was also really bad because my driving license had expired because when your visa ends, they take away your driving ability too. And so I was stuck in the house 24/7 unless my partner was home to take me out. And so I was just brooding in this like really like, I just lost my job. Everything sucks right now. I don't know what I'm going to do. My future looks dark. I can't even get out to get boba. By the way, boba is like a really big part of my life. And it was just like chaos. I remember being mentally being in such a dark place. Going through that, but I was very lucky to have people in my life who were such huge advocates for my work. So the university that I'm at now, you know, they weren't taking applications anymore because their deadline was like February. Right. And one of my mentors from my past university was like, we'll figure it out. We'll help you out. And so she was really instrumental.
So Dr. Hill.
Dr. Hill, yeah.
Yeah,
Dr.
she's been on the podcast too.
Oh, she's been on the podcast.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, she was back on 2021. But,
okay, that's probably. I thought it was recent, so I was like, wait, really?
No,
Okay, that's cool.
It was 2021.
Yeah. So
anyway, sorry.
Des, if
I'll
you're
link that
seeing this.
episode somewhere over here. But yeah.
But yeah, so she used to be the broadcast journalism professor here.
Yeah.
And she was a huge advocate for my work. She's the reason why I got into producing. Even like I wouldn't have gotten into journalism if it wasn't for her, because I was ready to be like a YouTuber. I mean, not exactly a YouTuber, but I was really influenced on like editing videos and that kind of like life. And so I was
because you also had a lot of projects you worked on that too. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Very different life, very different time back then. But she was, really, she knew the people at OU. Well, yeah. At OU because she had got her PhD there.
I can bleep that if you want me to.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I was like, I'm trying to think if it's even a point for me to block it. But anyway, so she knew a lot of people at OU because she had done a PhD there, and she was like, we're gonna help you. I'm gonna ask, and I think she really helped me to get that position there because they wouldn't have taken me in if I was anybody, right?
Yeah.
And so like it was July that I had left, and so I had basically a month before the semester started, and so I was back and forth with all these universities, like, are y'all taking late applicants? And they're like, no, we're not. Most of the big ones weren't. But OU was very nice, and they were like, hey, we can consider it. We'll let you know. We'll have to look at kind of your accomplishments, academic achievements, and kind of see where you were at. And I think I was lucky because I think a lot of programs now emphasize that professional experience.
Yeah.
Especially in the JMC kind of field, I think.
Gotcha.
And so because I had that.
Could you elaborate on what JMC is?
Oh, journalism and mass comm.
Okay.
Moving forward, that's what that means. So a lot of like JMC schools, I think, really focus on that professional experience. And so I was lucky that I had that with my kind of school experience plus my 1 year out. And so they were like, yeah, I think we can give you a shot. And I was also really lucky because I haven't paid full price on my tuition because I managed to get an assistantship there.
Nice.
Granted, it's a very competitive, and they look at kind of how you can help their students there. But I was lucky because somebody had dropped out as I was applying. And so it all kind of fell into place.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it at the time because, again, I was so distraught about losing my job and you were just trying to find a band-aid to slap over the wound, right?
Yeah.
But now looking back at it all, I was like, things really worked out really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate to be like that cringy person, but it's like, it's all going to work out eventually.
Right.
And like, if I, like, looking back, that Amanda could not have seen everything now because like now going through grad school, I found this new passion, I found new success. And like, again, I'm graduating this semester, so it's like a very sentimental moment for me. But it's like looking back and I'm like, damn, I literally could not have seen myself in this position. Like it feels so surreal. So that's like the good side of this ordeal.
For sure. I guess this is a topic of conversation we could have privately, but since we're on it, I just wanted to sort of bring it up. Have you heard about the O1 visa at all?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're considering?
Sort of. So I was talking about a friend with this because he was a photographer and he had lived in New York for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, I think I'm not sure if he had done the traditional 4 years here. I don't know what his education was when he came here, but he was here working. And, I was going through like that whole ordeal. And so I was posting about it on my social media a lot.
Yeah.
And he had reached out and was like, let's link up, let's chat. And so we were talking about it and he was like, you should consider the O1 visa. And I was like, I don't even think that applies, because it's like, I think it's the extraordinary
yes.
Alien one. And it's like on paper, I'm great as a student. I have these achievements sort of, but like in the grand scheme of things, that impact isn't there. And so like I had looked into it and kind of reading through those terms and conditions, and I was like, I don't think I can apply for that.
But I think, and I just like found out about this recently because funnily enough, I was listening to another podcaster talk about it. I'm talking about Chris Williamson, if anybody knows who that is. He's a podcaster from the UK who's based out of Austin, Texas. And I think...
Sorry, just the Austin, Texas was so random. I was
no.
It's like New York or like...
No, Austin's becoming like the new hub for people who don't want to be in California, I feel. Because a lot of people from California have migrated either to like Austin or like to parts of Florida. Granted, this is probably things that I've heard from like people in like the comedy space and things like that, or like the podcasting space, if you will.
Yeah.
because, for example, Joe Rogan, who's like probably one of the biggest podcasters in the world, he made the move from like LA to Austin. And
Just Texas is really funny.
yeah. But anyway, excuse me. But yeah, just to sort of elaborate on what these visa categories are, H-1B and O-1 are kind of similar in that they're both work visas. With H-1B, it's more of a lottery system. With an O-1, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But I think with O-1, there's also like another split. If you're a STEM major, it's like an O-1A. If you're in the media space, it's like an O-1B. If I'm not mistaken. And again, if there's an immigration lawyer watching this, I don't know why they would be, but if there is, please fact check us. But what was I going to say? Yeah, so you need to have extraordinary achievements in that field, right? And I was reading through it, and some of it was like, oh, okay, like if you can have a paper published on a journal, a pretty good journal, like that qualifies as one of the achievements. And I guess like another one was like winning some well-regarded award.
Yeah.
I know like the examples that they give is like a Nobel Prize or something.
Yeah, I think like within media, it's like you have to win an Emmy. And I'm like, girl, winning an Emmy as like a new producer is like, I think it's hard. Right. I mean, like, get Emmys is like such a big deal. Like, there's Emmys with like more actor type things, but there's also Emmys within like the news television sphere.
Right.
And it's like, man, I'm just trying to figure my life out as a news producer. Do you think I'm gonna get an Emmy in a year? You know, it's rough.
Right.
It's rough out here.
Yeah, but I guess the benefit of like the O-1 visa is that it's a dual intent visa. So you could apply for a green card and you can get extensions from it once you get approved for it. I think the visa is valid for 3 years. And then after that, every single year from there, you can get an extension. And then you can apply for a green card as well. Again, that's very minimal surface level knowledge that I have about it. Because we were on the topic, it just sort of came up. Because I feel like that's the major struggle for most international students, if not all, right? Like you stated earlier, like getting married to someone over here is usually like one of the ways to sort of make that work. I mean, I'm not passing judgment on anybody if you genuinely found, and neither are you. Neither of us are passing judgment at all, but it's sort of like a joke to make at this point in some circles. It's like, oh yeah, find yourself someone whom you can get married to.
Yeah, I mean, like I think back to all the people I know who's still here, and they're either students, found a job in academia, which is like not all of them have, or they're married to somebody here. Again, no judgment. Do whatever you want. Love is love.
Right.
But it's like, especially for me, because like I don't know a lot of people who are still here who are in mass comm. Like all of my friends who are international students are either still students here or they've moved home, or some of them are still here but they're married to somebody, or they have a job that's like within academia. And it's like the options for me was kind of weird because like my skills now may apply to academia, but as a master's student, you know, you don't have that breadth of knowledge that a PhD student will.
Right.
And so you're up for different positions than they would be if they go into academia. But then on the professional side, it sucks because, you know, you have that 1 year and then whoop-de-doo, you're going to go through that whole thing again, which I'm hoping I don't have to.
Yeah.
So it's rough out here.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's quite the challenge. I hate to make it sound so bleak, but I feel like the longer time goes, the harder it seems to be becoming, if that's the right way to phrase that sentence. Yeah, it just seems to be harder, like the lottery system and so on. Yeah, anyway.
I will say it's great character development.
Oh, for sure. I guess in some sense you could say that you get slapped around by life a little bit. But hey ho. You know, like, and that's the other thing, right? Like, even I learned a lot, not a lot, but a good amount about like immigration policy because I had to leave my job after a year too. My case was not having like the company not having an E-Verify credential or something, which again I did not know of until after I got the job. And again, things happen for a reason, so you know it is like I've moved on from that. We're okay now, but I can remember at that point I got the job so close to when I was running out of time, so I had to take the job. So even if they didn't have E-Verify at that point, I probably wouldn't have a choice. I still would have to take the job. So anyway, moving away from that.
We're going to get past the trauma.
Going
to something else.
Going to something else. Talk to me about like in the production space of like working in news, are you basically like even writing out the content for the presenters, or like how much of it is them being hands-on with some of it versus y'all just making everything for them just being the faces of it?
Yeah, I would say at least with the producing side of things, it's all about writing. It's about writing short broadcasts, like scripts that can be read to like a 7-year-old and they would understand it. Like I always have to tell my students, like we need to dumb the script down. Like it sounds very condescending, but it's like it's more of like, anybody could be watching the news. It could be somebody who has a PhD, someone who doesn't have any formal education, and you want to make sure you're going to be able to cater to everybody
Right.
because that information is important to everybody.
Yes.
And so my job is basically just writing a bunch of scripts. Part of it is kind of like what I do in research is like you take sources and you have to take information out of it and apply to your story. And so it's a lot of like processing in the head of like, how do you get this, like for example, a press release? How do you get this interview that's been shot for like 30 minutes? How do you condense it all down to like something that's digestible for somebody to understand? So I do a lot of writing for anchors, so people who present the news. So every time you hear like an anchor present something, that's a producer writing behind the scenes. Part of my job when I was at my old company was also to help like reporters. So these are the people who are making like recorded news packages, kind of helping them with their scripts, helping them develop the ideas as well. And so a lot of my job was writing. I was at my computer all day. I know at some point, I think maybe the first couple of weeks of my job there, I had picked up like a keyboard building keyboard building intro as well during COVID.
Yes.
And so
I remember seeing this on Instagram.
And so when I started there, they had like some like random like those like regular black like Amazon or like Logitech kind of keyboards. The first couple of days I was on it, I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna be sitting at my desk typing like 5 days a week here, we're taking this out. And I brought my own keyboard in. It had like rainbow LED and everything, and people were so fascinated with it. They were like, "Oh my god, can I touch your keyboard?" It was hilarious. Especially like talking to like the older adults who were like, "What is that? Why is it glowing?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's my keyboard." And he's like, "Do you want to touch it?" It's like, "Yeah." But yeah, no, that was a part. To answer your question in short, a lot of my job was writing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And by reporters, you mean people who go out into the scene, if you will, and are like, I don't know, say recording a package at the Oklahoma Zoo. I don't know why that's the example that's coming to my mind. But
that has happened. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I guess that would be an example of like you working with them and working with the people in front.
Yeah.
Are you also? I guess there's someone else running a teleprompter, right?
Yes. It depends because now a lot of stations have shifted to a more kind of automated system. So like the old station that I used to work with was manual. So you had people, like actual people manning cameras, you had people manning teleprompter, but now they've shifted to a more automated system. And so I know now, again, cameras are all automated, so those jobs were cut. And then prompter, I think at the station, from what I've heard, is automated as well. So they kind of track your voice and go as that.
Interesting.
I think, again, haven't been back there in a while.
No, that's okay.
What I've heard from the rumblings of people I still keep in touch with.
Gotcha.
But like that's been a thing for a lot of stations across the country. When they have the monies, they shift to automation so they can also cut down on labor costs there as well.
Right.
Yeah.
How would cameras be automated?
Well, from what I know, I think it's like you can program it in advance to move different ways.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, I only know that people are no longer working as camera operators anymore because a lot of my friends were cut when they did the big move, and so it looks a little different now. But sometimes prompter traditionally is run by somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like someone either like scrolling on the screen or whatever that's called, and then as they go down. Because I mean, there's a ton of bloopers out there of like people like misreading what's on there or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like any funny stories from your experience over there that you sort of
funny stories
recollect?
It's hard because like half my job I was just half asleep because I was working those graveyard hours.
Right.
I don't know, funny. I don't know about funny.
Maybe not funny, but any memorable experience. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, I've loved as much as I hated working the graveyard shift because I was so tired all the time. I was working with people I loved. One of my assistant producer, he was my best friend. We had gone to UCO together and we went to the same job, and he was, working with people that vibe so well with you was great. And we were all so delusional at that hour because you were all like sleep deprived. It was just fun. And like I at least try to be somebody who's more like positive when I'm in the newsroom, because again, the job is so stressful, and my approach with it is I don't want to be this like angry kind of person
Yeah.
at like 5 in the morning when people don't even want to be there. And so we always try to have fun on the show. You know, I'll be sitting in the booth and I'll just sit and I'm like, all right, we're gonna go to this other package. You know, it's trying to make it more lively. I love the people I worked with. We were all just losing it all together. So it's just, yeah, I don't know if that's the most memorable thing, but that's what I miss most about working there. It's like that camaraderie with all these people who are going through hell with you. It was just fun.
Gotcha.
Trauma bonding.
I mean, hey, that's one way of bonding, I suppose. Another thing that just popped up in my mind, like in terms of the production aspect of it, maybe I'm just geeking out,
No,
but
you're fine.
so you're the person who would be in the ear of the presenter, correct? Like if you're going on or if you're going to commercial, or if you're about to cut to commercial, you tell them, you give them like a timer or something.
Yeah, so I'm basically the annoying person in the back of their ear going, all right, we're in your package. All right, we have this other thing. Okay, this story, we just floated it. You're not reading it. We're going to go through this thing. Or, yeah, this break's going to be 3 minutes long. Or I'm always in their ear. I always feel bad about it, but that's a necessary part of the job.
Right.
I just try to make sure that I'm communicating only like essential information, so I'm not overloading them with stuff. And sometimes we'll have just have fun. You know, I had an anchor, we were really close. She's moved on to a different station now, but we would just gossip on our IFV system during like a break or something. Like, have you heard about this other thing? Or like, did you see this thing somebody posted? Like, it was fun. It's just having full-on conversations during a break or something. And it's like, it's so fun because like, again, people at home, they only see what you give them.
Right.
But behind the scenes, we're either losing it or we're having so much fun, or like something's on fire and we're trying to put it out, not literally on fire, like
metaphorically speaking, of course. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was always like my favorite part of the show. And it's like, especially on the weekend mornings, because like, again, I didn't expect anybody to be watching it because it was so freaking early in the morning. I wouldn't be awake to watch it, right? But it was so fun because I felt that I could have so much like liberty to push the boundaries of what I could do and experiment and be creative because, again, nobody was watching it, and so if it messed up, it's fine. But
and there's not many eyes watching it, so the margin for error is a little more wider.
Yeah, and it was fun too because like it's a weekend morning. No, not a single manager wants to be there, and like they trust. I want to say they trusted me enough to not do anything stupid. But it was fun because I could make like really important decisions on my own. So like part of my job on the weekend mornings was I had to listen to police scanners, which is fun. It was a skill that
Please
you had
elaborate on what a police scanner is.
So a police scanner is basically like a bunch of walkie-talkies, and it's connected to police. Okay. And so as they're responding to like car crashes or house fires or a drunk man in the middle of a road type situations, like you can hear that all through that walkie-talkie, and that's how news people get to the scene of breaking news. We have to literally listen to communication from police. Like it's not like literally.
And that's the producer's job.
Not necessarily. Usually you have an assignment editor do that, but on weekend mornings, because we were so short staffed, I would do that partially during my shift, and then the assignment editor would take over when he got in eventually. Gotcha. And so part of my job was listening to police scanners and then having to determine if it was important enough for us to send somebody to it. And so I was the annoying person who had to call my coworkers at 3 a.m. asleep and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I know it's like 3 in the morning and you just got home from drinking, but like, can you go to the scene for me real quick? Yeah, it's like sometimes that was just part of the job, right? We didn't want to be the person that missed a story that everybody else had, because again, weekends, it's weekends. But sometimes stuff happens on weekends that becomes so big that it becomes a story that happens throughout the rest of the week as well. And so you didn't want to be that person who was like, why didn't you go to get this? And I'm like, well, I didn't know any better, you know? So part of my job was also doing that. And usually that's like a assignment editor, manager kind of decision of who do we send out there. I usually had no say in that because the assignment editor, who's literally that's his job, would do that. But on the weekends, it was like I could have this authority, this kind of control to make these decisions that are really big. And it always kind of fulfilled me a little way that, you know, I'm this, back then I was like 21, you know, this like 21-year-old little Asian girl is helping command the ship for the show that was coming up. So that was always really fun for me.
I guess this whole police kind of thing and like the like being on top of it kind of, I guess it makes sense right now that I mean, I don't watch news as much, but just knowing a little bit about the news, like I guess there's always this friendly fire maybe of like trying to be the first to get to a news um or a scene about something, because then you have the scoop, like you have the information the quickest and so on. um were there situations where you had to sort of let go of some things, or like, because you kind of, I mean, in that case excuse me, in that case, I guess you're deciding what you think is important and what is not, right?
Yes.
Do they give you like guidelines to what you need to operate by, or is it more like, oh, I don't think this is important, fuck it?
Well, unfortunately, the model that a lot of people in news follow is if it bleeds, it leads.
Right. I
Death
remember
and
you
gore.
saying this the last time too. Yeah.
Nothing has changed. So death and gore always lead. And so one of the things that we always sent people out to on the weekends was car crashes. And I always remember that's when police call, they'll say like, signal 82. Signal 82 basically means that was a pedestrian versus car or something. Or like a, not pedestrian versus car, but like there's an injury crash involved.
Is that them communicating amongst themselves, or is
That's
that them
amongst themselves?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
it's somebody. So it's dispatch calling different units to go respond to something.
I see.
And so we're like a third party in that process, listening to what they're telling all these units to respond to. So they'll be like, okay, fire. I don't remember what it was. It's been so long, but it's like they'll call like a fire truck. They'll call a police car. Whatever. Depending on the case.
The need.
Yeah. And so usually like signal 82 would be something that we send people out to because it would be an injury crash. Sometimes you hear like really weird things, like people fighting each other with machetes. I know that happened one weekend. You have a lot of like disturbance calls, and then like there was just like a naked man in the middle of the road. Like hey, the weekends were fun because you never knew what you could expect. I guess Signal 82 was that. We sent people out to shootings a lot, especially on the weekends. Bricktown especially.
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, like early morning, there's always a shooting about to happen.
And Bricktown is like the part of downtown in Oklahoma City, for those who don't know.
Yeah. And so, we kind of just send, at least when I was in that position, it was sending people based on kind of, unfortunately, death and gore, because that's what leads.
Right.
I know I personally have different ethical views on it that I've been trying to explore more now that I'm out of it and in grad school. But that's typically usually the case, because you never know, especially with like when there's a death or blood involved, whether it's a bigger thing, right? For example, you could be sending somebody to like a shooting that it seems like, oh, one person just shot the other. It seems very simple, but when you come back Monday morning, it's like, oh, this is a bigger thing. It was a husband killing his wife, or it's like there's a bigger story.
It could be a developing situation.
Yeah, it sucks. I personally I always try to like, at least now that I'm out of it, I have more time to kind of think about the decisions I used to make as a producer, and I always wonder if it was really public need to know to go through these kind of things.
Interesting.
But there's a lot of like debate about that. Again, my managers would say a different thing, I would say a different thing, but you know.
Let's get into that a little, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah.
What do you think is important for the people to know versus what is not important for the people to know?
I don't know. Like when I'm thinking of like anything that has like loss in it, so like a death or a car crash, a shooting, these kind of things. I know part of it is important because you want to make sure. It's like, I know sometimes you can spit into like an awareness story.
Sure.
Like here's don't drive while drunk and that kind of thing. But I'm also like, I always wonder, like, is it really worth it blasting this person's name out to the world that they died in this really tragic way? And I'm like thinking of like, for example, like if I had known somebody who had died in like such a tragic manner, and then to see their face plastered at the 4, 5, 6 shows, constantly like, yeah, we know that 32-year-old blah, blah, blah died because of this. It's like, is it really helping? Do the public really need to know? Am I just re-traumatizing their family and friends every time we mention his name? And so when I started my grad school, I was so set on, again, I've shifted away from the mission a little bit because it's a little bit unrealistic. But I took a media psychology class in my first year, and it was talking about, part of the class was like, how do negative images impact people,
Right.
right? And I always remember writing in my reaction papers, because that's the thing you have to do a lot in grad school. I was like, I don't even know if it bleeds, it leads is a really good model anymore. Because technically, if I'm remembering things correctly from my classes, it was, if you keep stacking all these negative things, people eventually tune out. Yeah. And so it's like, what was the point in us doing crime after death after death after crime after death if people weren't even going to listen anyway? And so I always like wrestle with the idea of, is this even really the right model to follow? And granted, I know in academia there's a lot of debate, and industry does a lot of debate, but like in my head I'm kind of like, I don't know if it's worth it for us to keep turning, like, to go to every single car crash, every single death. Like, is there public good to it? But that's just me.
Yeah, because I think to what you said, right, like people tuning out those kind of things, like I think you eventually set that as like a baseline, right? So you're like, oh, this happens every day. Like, why should I care about what's happening today, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Like, I don't know, there's a lot to sort of explore there, but I guess I'll get into like the research aspect of things, because you mentioned earlier that, you felt that sense of burnout when you got in. And like you grieved leaving the job after. So were those like things that influenced your want to do this research specifically? Or if not, what was it that influenced you to research the topic that you're researching?
Yeah, like specifically with burnout, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I think definitely my work experiences played a huge part into what I want to do. I remember I took my first research methods class, my first semester in grad school, and they were basically like, all right, write up like a short proposal or like a just word vomit of like, what do you want to study?
Yeah.
And I remember writing this really long thing about how like I hated being at work because everything sucked all the time, and there wasn't any free counseling that I could go to. And I wanted to find something that could help journalists not feel burnout or traumatized as much. I mean, I know like it's a given that you will, with trauma especially.
Yeah.
But
especially when you see the things that you do.
doesn't go all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember just writing so passionately about it and saying like, I really want to figure this out. I want to find actual like realistic resources for journalists to use. And I don't remember what the pitch was, but my pitch in that moment was so big that my professor was like, all right, I need you to like cut that down a little bit to figure out what you really want, because in research you have to be specific, otherwise you don't reach a goal.
It has to be a little more focused.
Yeah. And so definitely like in my 3-minute thesis, I recite this so many times now, but like I was burnt out after 3 months of working there in my first year. And, I was lucky because I loved being in the job so much. I stuck through it the whole way. But I also know a lot of my peers who we thought were going to stay in news the longest. Now they're in PR, or now they're in a communications job.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's like, I remember from working with them how talented these people are, and now they're just gone. Like, that sucks for the industry and for the station that they used to be at. And I was like, we can't just keep hiring people who are talented and have all this worth, and then you burn them out and they leave, and then you're at a loss.
Just having that high turnover doesn't really help anybody.
Yeah. And especially coming out of COVID, when we saw like, the great resignation with people leaving their jobs everywhere. It was like, this was not an epidemic, but this was a really huge problem that I was like, I feel like this needs to be my calling. And so that was something I started tackling in my first semester through, trying, at least not literally tackling it, but I was like writing proposals, trying to figure out that issue, right? And so I think that's how I ended up coming to kind of my current kind of thesis topic, if you will.
Which is?
Examining burnout amongst Gen Z TV journalists. It's depressing.
I mean, it's something that needs to be researched based on that conversation that we were having before we started recording. And some of it is sad, like in some sense when you think about it, but in some sense I feel like it is the need of the hour.
Yeah, I think especially for me, it's like, I think back to who I was when I first started the job, and it's like, I almost want to solve this problem to help her, because like, I just remember going through it so like deeply, like that memory of just like, I hated being at work. I couldn't even like, I hated the thought of driving to work, you know, and like being in that space. Like, I was just like, I was wondering if I'd spent all these 4 years studying here for nothing. Was I supposed to be meant for a different career? And it was like, was this all a waste of time? And I remember just being in such a dark place then. It was like, now that I'm in a more privileged position to reflect on my experiences. It was I need to help her and other people like me, because if everybody keeps burning out, no one's going to be left,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you talked to any of like the older generations by any chance? I'm curious to know like if they've talked to you about their experience and how they navigate those issues.
Yeah, not as much in a more research setting, I would say. I've
But
done generally sometimes, I would say, like more of like it wasn't like I literally sat down and was like, how is your burnout going?
Sure.
But when you're close to these journalists and you work in the same space all the time, it's like that trauma bond. Sometimes you just kind of mention things in passing that it's like, oh, well, you're experiencing burnout. And I think now, especially now that I'm more informed of what it actually is as a researcher, it's like thinking back to my conversation with people just in passing, it's like, okay, that person was definitely feeling burnout, or this person was definitely experiencing something, and so a lot of my friends were, I was like the youngest person in the newsroom. So a lot of my friends were older than me in a couple of years, but they were mostly kind of like millennials, Gen X, if any. But yeah, I mean, definitely we all had our fair share of just talking about, if it wasn't exactly burnout, like just negative experiences being in the newsroom. So
yeah, because I mean, and this is something that I've also thought about in like the forensic science space, because my research is sort of similar to yours, and then we're looking at stress among people in forensic science. I don't know if this is entirely true, but from what I can gather from anecdotal evidence, so it's nothing to write home about, but these things do affect them. I guess they find ways to cope with it through like their lifestyle changes, be it alcohol, cigarettes, or whatever that may be, or even just laughing it off.
Yeah.
But it gets to you at some point. And I was hearing the story recently of someone in like the forensic science space in general who is generally known to be quite a calm person, but then would start snapping for no reason and so on. But anyway, like so you can like those are signs like things are getting to you at this point, right? I'm no psychologist, but
neither am I.
Right, but our subconscious stores a lot of this data that we view and observe, right? Even if we are consciously able to reason out of that feeling that we might have, subconsciously somewhere it does sort of stay with you, I guess, is sort of like the conclusion I've come to. So yeah, I can't imagine like what a journalist might go through, especially like journalists who were on the ground during 9/11 or like hurricane, was it Katrina?
Katrina, yeah.
Right. So yeah, I just wonder like what their perspectives might be on that and how they sort of navigate through those things. And speaking specifically about like Gen Zs, we kind of talked about how that would be the age group of people who are just graduating, like fresh graduates, or like people about to go to grad school and so on. Do you think they know enough about it before going into it that they might experience these things?
It's hard to say, because like I know as a generation, I'm gonna say we because I'm Gen Z, but we're a lot more vocal about mental health. That's something, we're more vocal about things in general. But I know mental health is one of those huge topics as well.
Right.
But like research has also shown that Gen Z struggle more with their mental well-being than other generations. And it's like, when I went into the business, like I knew what burnout was, right? I knew of the term, but I didn't really know what it was.
You hadn't experienced it.
Yeah, until
at that point.
Until I had stepped out of it and started researching, and I was like, okay, now I can point to these signs that I was feeling, that okay, these were all burnout combined. That was just how it manifested within me. And so I don't know, it's hard to say. It's like, yes, we're more vocal about it, but at the same time we also struggle with it. So womp womp.
Right. This might be a bit of a devil's advocate sort of argument that I'm going to make now, but I was just listening to someone recently somewhere talking about this. I feel like maybe I watch and listen to so many things I don't know where they're coming from. But I think this was a journalist who recently wrote a book on like mental health issues. I think she was on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Okay.
I did not watch the entire episode, but I think it was a short clip about her talking about like how people deal with problems today. and how some of it at the end of the day is just about going through it and not ruminating on it. I almost wonder that the culture that we're in today, we sort of ruminate about it a little too much. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I'll be completely honest. I'm very guilty of that. I can tend to sit in my corner and just
kind of like pity party almost type of.
Not just pity party, but also sort of overanalyze the situation.
Okay. Yeah.
And just sort of stay there rather than like trying to do something to move on from it or fix it or anything, right? So I almost wonder, like, do you think that that might be true in some sense?
I will approach it more from a journalist standpoint, just because that's where my expertise is. But I think it's a little different for us because my argument is that we don't have the space or the time to deal with it.
Right.
Because, you have days off, but you are still expected to truck through every day.
Yeah.
Constantly looking at, traumatic things. And like you said, 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, there were really big things. But even like going to a shooting and going to like what's considered like an everyday story for journalists, that's also traumatic. And I feel like we forget about it because we're so desensitized, because we're always seeing these kind of things. But like we're expected to go through every day covering some negative thing every single day and truck through like nothing happened. And it's like once you get home, it's like, do you even have time to check out? Because work emails, or if you're on call, you have to come back in, or if they need, more staff, they're gonna call you to come back in. And it's like, do you even have time to rest? Is my thing. And I think for journalists especially, that was an article from the, I think, American Press Institute, if I'm remembering my thesis citations correctly, that kind of talked about, journalists are so resilient. It's sometimes easy to forget that we have burnout. Like it's harder for us to spot burnout, is what one of the people who wrote the article said. And I that resonated with me. Sure. Because it was like, yeah, I'm feeling shit, but I don't have time to deal with it. Right. It was, I feel like shit today. I don't have time to take PTO. I don't have time to take a mental health day. I have to come back to work next day, and who knows, I'm going to have to see another shooting or see another thing, or it's going to be a stressful day, and I can't do anything about it. And so that was my experience, at least. Granted, I'm somebody who also took on a lot. As somebody who was new, I was trying to prove myself, right? I'm like, I'm worth the hire. I'm worth you sponsoring a visa. I'm worth being here. And I was always kind of like, hey, if you need me to cover, I got you. Or if you need somebody to fill in or do this extra thing, I got you. I was trying to be that person that people could rely on. Like go above and beyond. Yeah. And so I know, looking back, I did stretch myself thin. I wouldn't change anything because it's made me the person I am today. But I also know a part of my problem was that as well. I was very perfectionist in my work, and I was like, I needed to be perfect at everything. And so, I didn't have time to think about it. At least that's my experience. No, that's fair. That's fair. Because that's the other side of it, right? Like sometimes you have a lot of time to think about it, to where you just think too much about it, and you have like analysis paralysis, if you will. That's a good way to put it. And then on the other side, you don't have time to think about it at all, and just you're just sort of pushing your emotions down, and then moving forward. I guess at the end of the day, it's sort of like some meeting in the middle somewhere, to where you find the time to process it when you can. But then, like you said, sometimes it helps to have systems that are built around it. Yeah. But how much of that do you think is also like personal responsibility in some sense? I think it's a mix, because my argument, at least with what I do, is I feel like some of it falls on workplace culture and management for sure, because like burnout is really, at least the burnout that I'm studying, because I know that people define it differently. Yeah, there's like subscales to burnout as well, right? Like I think there's emotional exhaustion, so depersonalization. Do you want to go into it? Yeah. So the 3 signs is exhaustion, cynicism, and then reduced personal efficacy. And these were like the 3 ways it manifests, or you need 3 to have burnout. Again, some scholars have debated on which 3 and whether everything's important, but I digress. What was I going to say? I had a point. So like the burnout I'm focused on is really looking at like workplace, right? It's all about workplace stresses, and whether that, I think the World Health Organization defines it as workplace stress that hasn't been like managed successfully. And so because it's so workplace focused, my argument is that management has to deal with it too. They foster the workplace culture, and they are the ones who have the power to give and take away support.
Yeah.
And so if they're not supplementing their employees well, what you're gonna do?
Right.
Like that's, I think, part of it. But I will say, I think personally, there is some responsibility too, because it also depends on your coping skills, your resiliency. Do you make time for yourself to do that? But I think I would argue that it falls still on management, because you're going to be in a workplace 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right. And part of that is how they need to figure it out.
Sure.
Is my argument. But
yeah. I mean, for me personally, I think again, it's somewhere like again, it's hard to strike that balance because we live imbalanced lives, but it's like somewhere in between. I feel like personal responsibility, but you also want the systems you're around to support you in one way or another, because you're spending a good chunk of your time there.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice if you had something there that would support you to sort of check out a little bit, or check out for a bit for a bit rather, words. Yeah, because the clinic that I was working for before I moved back, I remember like, I think like 5 or 6 months after I went there, they had set up like a small room that they had a massage chair in, and they had like yoga mats and stuff. So you could literally book the room during lunch hours and like go and just hang out over there. So I remember like, so in the lab, since I used to work in the lab, we would have to come in on Saturdays as well.
Yeah.
But the rest of the clinic was closed on Saturday except for like urgent care, which was downstairs. So there's nobody upstairs. It's just like, and we would just have one person in the lab.
Okay.
So there's 4 people working in the lab in total. And like for the 4 weeks in the month, every person gets to work a week on Saturdays.
I see.
So I remember on Saturdays, because there's nobody there, I'd usually like take out the entire hour just chilling in the massage chair and all that sort of stuff. So it was nice. Like, like I wouldn't have to smell someone's diarrhea poop for a little while.
It sounds like you have a very specific memory tied to that, and I'm very curious. You don't have to say it, but
no. For people who are grossed out by diarrhea, I'm getting into something right now. If you don't want to talk about it,
I'm so curious because you mentioned such a specific like notion.
Yeah.
To this, and I was like, there's a very specific memory tied to it.
No, like in a sense, I said that more as like a joke.
Yeah.
But also, like, I remember instances where I would turn like a situation into a joke, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Oh God, this is gonna get very graphic. So for those of you who are grossed out, I apologize. But I remember there was a poop sample that we once got, and it was just like this very weird consistency.
Sorry.
I'll stop there.
No,
it's okay.
I forget that we work in very different fields.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, obviously it makes sense because you work in. Yeah, no, it makes sense.
As a lab tech for a clinic, where we would have old people and young people, kids, everybody falling sick. So yeah, we would make jokes about the consistency sometimes.
I mean, hey, whatever you got to do to cope, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Because sometimes we would get samples where like what are they called? They're not called nurses. There's a specific term for them, I'm forgetting. But anyway, like the way that they prepare the sample also goes wrong because they don't add certain diluents in it. And you need that diluent in there for us to be able to put the sample in the testing kit, if you will. So yeah, sometimes we'd be like, oh shit, there we go again. Figuratively and literally.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so anyway. It's nice to be able to take a break and switch off for a little bit in your own workspace.
Yeah.
And again, granted, Saturdays were not that bad. Saturdays were quite chill, in all honesty. We would have to work on, I'm going to name the machine, because we had, well, not me, but the people who were there had named the machines. So the big machine that we had was called Lulu. Because she would act like a lemon sometimes, because the machine would break down. You know, have you heard about
lemon?
Yeah, so Lululemon and like a lemon. Have you heard about this phrase of like a machine being a lemon or like a car being a lemon? No. So basically that means that like it breaks down quite often and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of like the connotation there. So yeah, like they named the big machine Lulu because sometimes she would have some trouble and she's being a lemon.
I love that. I love it.
So yeah, so like sometimes we would have to do like maintenance work on Saturdays, like monthly maintenance and so on. So that's pretty much what I would do, and then rest of the day was pretty chill. Um, but anyway, I don't know why I got into that tangent, but what I was getting at was, yeah, it's nice to have those spaces where you're able to relax for a little bit. And like if they could create such corners in offices, it would really be nice,
Yeah.
right? How much of it is an awareness issue and how much of it is like an ignorance thing?
I feel like it's both,
Right.
right? It's like, I think awareness does play a part. You
Mhm.
know, if I back then knew what burnout, how it manifested,
Mhm.
I could have probably spotted it earlier. And
The library is gonna close in 30 minutes.
how do you just have this recited? I love that. I love that for you.
Thank
What was I saying? Yeah, if me back then at 21, when I was going through burnout, if I had known how it would have manifested and what the signs were to look out for, I think I would have been better at kind of like helping myself get through it.
Yeah.
I think the ignorance part is also just like, that's just a big part in journalism culture, I feel, right? We're expected to truck through. You know, I was on a panel yesterday at my school for a conference talking about trauma and burnout and what people needed to know, faculty and students wise, right? And I was saying along the lines of like, it's part of just the culture of journalism because we're expected to be robots, right? We have this big, umbrella like objectivity standard, right? That's what makes journalism journalism. And
being objective and
yeah, and it's, I feel like for a while, decades, and however, it's always, hey, if you show any emotion, if you show that you're human, even, you're not a journalist anymore. And that's, I think, a mindset that I've eventually learned that that's really toxic for anybody. Whenever I'm with my students, especially because, I see them as the people that I used to hang out with at my school, right? We were the people going through the student newscast, and we were so excited about being journalists. And I'm seeing those people with my own students now, and it's like I need to do what I can to make sure that they're going to be set up for success, right? And so I always try to take a human first, journalist second approach. I try to be like, hey, if you haven't eaten today, you have to eat now.
right.
I don't care. You have to eat. What I've learned, at least from all the years, is if you're not healthy, you can't work effectively, right? And there's no point in you, punishing yourself for the name of your job, which is weird coming from me because I'm a workaholic, but like the culture of journalism is just like, it's built in such, you have to be a robot all the time, and that doesn't help anybody. And so I think that ignorance, a part of it just comes from the industry standard. And so it's like the perfect storm of just shit, I guess, for journalists to deal with. It's as far as like experiencing burnout goes. So that's why it's been such a passion project for me to really tap into.
Right. So like through your research, what you're going to be doing is interviewing a lot of them, right? And sort of talking to them about their experiences.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal is to sort of use that data to sort of suggest what could be done.
Yeah. So part of my research is looking at kind of how they experience it, how they define it, because I want to know if they actually know what burnout is, right? My big argument is like, if you don't know what the problem is, you can't solve it. And so the hope is kind of from my research, kind of talking to them about how they experience it, how they define it, kind of what factors kind of play into that experience. And then I have a question in there that kind of looks into, what do you want out of the experience? Like, what do you think should be done to help you? And so my hope is, from whatever data I get, we write up a report, and I'm hoping to get both kind of the educator and the practitioner sides to really weigh in on it, because at the end of the day, I'm an overachieving person, right? I don't want my work to just be there for me to graduate. I want it to actually make an impact.
Mean something,
Yeah, and there's no point in me, all the blood, sweat, tears I put into my degree for it to just exist in some repository online somewhere. I want it to actually help people like me.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that I'm planning to chat with, management and both professors, and kind of like, what does this look like and how can we implement this to help Gen Z, current and future journalists. So we'll see. I have a big task to tackle the next couple of months, but it's
hey, I think I think you'll be okay. I think you'll do great.
Thank you.
Yeah, because no, like and especially like we sort of hinted on during our conversation, our generation just deals with a lot of it. So it becomes much more important to sort of focus on it and like do anything that you can to help them going along the way. But I guess to sort of taper off towards the latter stages of our conversation, how do you sort of navigate those situations where you need that second to switch off? Is it boba?
Yeah. If you look at my like Discover history, I get like boba twice a week at least. Now, I think if I look at who I was as an undergrad / professional working versus now, I think I've become a lot more kinder to myself.
Okay.
A lot of people don't think that. Because they see the work I put in and they're like, you need to rest, and I'm like, I am more than usual. Now I try to make sure my weekends are just for fun. So like, this is fun, right?
Yeah.
I try not to do work on weekends unless I really have to. I've taken a couple mental health days during the program. I always feel super guilty about it because I'm like, I never want to skip class. You know? But there was some times where I just like, if I were to push myself any further, I'm going to be out. I'm not going to be able to do anything. And so my professors at least have been, my program in a whole, they've been very kind. And kind of fostering that really, careful.
Like a very understanding environment.
Understanding about, yes, that's what I was looking for. My graduate director, sometimes he'll see me as like, make sure you rest, okay? And I'm like, got it. But I'm also like an academic validation girly, so like, I try to find that balance. But I've been a lot more kind of myself in that end, kind of like, if I can't extend myself and expect myself to do great. I can only do so much as a person. I'm only human after all.
Yeah.
And I've I've had to like learn how to let go of certain responsibilities and say no to things. Because again, I'm somebody who likes to take on a lot, so I can do all this. It's fun, but at the end of the day, it's like, again, so much to handle. Jack of all trades, master of none. That kind of mentality, low key.
Yeah. No, but actually, there's a. Sorry to cut you off.
Fine.
I'll let you continue in a second, but there's actually like, and I think I've talked about this on another episode. Do you know that there's like a second part to that phrase?
No.
So I think
I feel like I've heard of it, but I don't remember it off the bat.
Jack of all trades, full. I could have fact checked myself earlier too, I guess, but I will do it now. Okay, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes is better than a master of one.
Oh. No. No.
You disagree?
No, I'm joking. I feel like I disagree because I feel like, well, it also depends on where you work. I feel like it's
sure.
I would rather be more all-rounded at something.
I think this is what it's suggesting, is that a jack of all trades is a master of none.
Oh, but it's better than
but
a master
oftentimes
of
is better than a master of one.
Never mind. I totally misread that.
You're good.
Yes. I take it back.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. And so, saying no, a lot more things. And then like I feel like finding your community is really important too. Again, I love the people that I work with at school. All the people who have assistantships at my college, we all stuck in the same office together.
Yeah.
So we're all going through the same kind of pains of grad school together. And we're always really good about checking in on each other. I have a friend who has consistently throughout my program always asked me, how am I doing? And I usually respond with either it's going or or I'm going great. And the other day he asked me, like, how are you doing? I'm like, I think I'm doing okay. He's like, oh, you didn't respond with an that's great. And I was like, we're making progress.
Right.
And so I think being able to find that community to really support me both inside and outside of grad school has been really helpful as well. And so I like to say I'm a little kind to myself. I'm kind of setting my standards for my achievement a little bit lower. So
there's just another question that popped up as soon as you said that. Is that more of like setting a standard in terms of achievement or in terms of expectation? Kind
of both. For me, it's kind of hard because sometimes I equate expectation to achievement.
Right.
Like recently with the 3-minute thesis stuff, I, again, still kind of mentally analyzing it, sort of reflecting. But I joined it as a whoop-de-doo, whatever, we'll see. I saw your post about it, UCO's post about it, and I was like, maybe I should do that too. So you literally inspired me to join the competition.
No. I'm no inspired. Words.
I'm calling you my inspiration anyway. So I joined it literally the day before the deadline closed.
Thank you.
And I was like, no, you're fine. Please stop.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be an asshole.
You're doing fine. You are doing fine. You're not an asshole. Everything's fine.
Like,
But I basically had joined the competition like a day before because I was like, what the heck? I'm in my last semester. We might as well just go big or go home, right?
yeah.
And so I actually did not expect to make it that far into the finals because, again, I had a proposal at that point. I could talk about the problem and I could talk about what I wanted to do, but I had really no meat to show for it because
no data to show.
I had no data, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't expect to get into the finals, but when I did, my head was like, all right, now I gotta bring it home, right? If I don't place, I'm a failure, right? And so obviously I didn't place because it was hard to make it that far without results. And I remember like my graduate director and my advisor were like, you did such a good job. Like that was so great. We haven't had a student from our college get to the finals since like 7 years.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, like that. It was that. And it was like, yeah, no, it's a really good accomplishment for a master's student. But I remember just sitting there and I was like, I didn't place. I didn't get the money. I didn't place. And yeah, so I feel like for me, at least mentally, it kind of merges sometimes. I'm trying to separate it and trying to be better about it.
Yeah.
But sometimes, the perfectionist, overachiever, academic validation part kind of just still creeps up anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing about our experience as human beings, right? Like you eventually learn to, or at least you can hope that you learn to navigate those things and sort of fine-tune those things wherever you can. But yeah, the one thing that I'm starting to realize a lot more, especially with like the past few years of my life, is that I shouldn't put myself in situations of analysis paralysis for too long.
Yeah.
Also, you kind of have to just take the next step, whatever that may be, because that's the best you can do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Turn off on a more positive note, I guess. What's something that you hope comes out of your research?
Oh, I would really want, one of the people on my committee, he's a really big name in the industry.
Okay.
I don't know if he's a big name, but like a lot of people know him. Like he's
Sure.
been around. He was like a veteran journalist. He went to like Baghdad and he was involved in all this kind of war coverage. And he was like the first person to go live for CNN. Like it's crazy.
He saw the Baghdad thing live?
No, like he reported like in the war.
Gotcha, during the Iraq war.
Yeah.
The Iran-Iraq.
Yeah, like I think in general, like he was, I think, one of the first reporters to go live for CNN.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, so he like knows a lot, like his brain scares me a little bit, like he knows a lot. He knows a lot of people in the industry, like big names, kind of high execs in like national bureaus and stuff like that. And he's been a really huge champion for my work. During my thesis proposal defense, he was like, yeah, when we get this out, I'm going to make sure this hits all the different newsrooms because I want them to see this.
Yeah.
And it's like we're going to figure that out eventually, but my hope is really that. Like I want, even if people aren't going to tell me they're implementing it, I want, both managers, educators, or even journalists themselves to read this and say, hey, now I know more about this topic and I can help myself with it.
Right.
And so that's kind of the big hope is I want the industry to change eventually.
Yeah.
Granted, I am one little piece of paper, versus this huge kind of problem within the industry. But I just want to do my part to kind of help us because, again, it's so prevalent in our industry. And it's not okay to just keep it going and just be like, yeah, that's a problem in our industry. And sure, we'll just let it happen. It needs to change. Yeah.
So sort of like seeing it as like a launching pad for things to happen down the road. Because you need to set the foundation somewhere, right? So that's awesome. Well, more power to you. I wish you the very best with your study.
We'll see.
And thank you so much for sitting down and having this chat. We've gone for close to an hour and 25 now.
Fine.
This is good. Had a good time?
Yeah, no, it's a lot more fun being in person and actually sitting and chatting with you instead of over Zoom because I had so many connectivity issues.
Yeah, I remember like there was a lot of lag, and I think like for a brief minute or so towards the end, like I think we completely cut out.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about the ether.
The 3-second like delay with like answering. I always feel so awkward like doing Zoom things, and so it's nice to just catch up with you. It's also been a hot minute since I last saw you, so it's been nice. So thanks for having me back on.
No, of course. So thank you so much for once again coming on.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening and watching, thank you so much. We will see you guys next time. Adios.
Go get boba.